Welcome back to MHS, Midnight Horror Stories. I know many of you choose these videos to relax and easily drift off to sleep. Before you slip into your dreams, could you do me a small favor? Leave a quick interaction and let us know where you're watching this and at what time. Now, let's begin tonight's horror stories. It's been almost a year since I last stepped into a McDonald's. It's not because the food is terrible or the experience was bad. It's because every time I see Ronald's curly red hair and wide grin on an advertisement, I find myself standing silently in a cemetery on a biting cold night in front of a small grave with the name Michael. I was 20 at the time, working as a mascot at McDonald's restaurants throughout Los Angeles. That evening, I had just finished my shift at a McDonald's branch. The other employees were cleaning up and getting ready to close. I was putting away a few items near the entrance, about to go change and head home when a woman appeared. She was middle-aged, thin, wearing a gray sweater. Her gray hair fell over her shoulders, and her sunken eyes looked directly at me. "Excuse me, we're about to close," I said, but she didn't move. Her eyes scrutinized me from head to toe. She said, "My son wants to meet Ronald." I looked at her suspiciously. She pulled out a $50 bill from her pocket. "Michael loves Ronald McDonald and wants to take a picture with him. I'll pay you extra for your time." $50 wasn't a small amount for me back then, and her eyes seemed so sincere. Plus, the job she was asking for wasn't difficult at all. "Where is Michael?" I asked. She smiled softly. "Just follow me." We walked to a car parked by the side of the road. She drove slowly, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. I tried to make conversation to break the silence. "How old is Michael?" 8 years old. He's very smart." I nodded, waiting for her to say more, but she just stayed silent. "When did Michael start liking Ronald McDonald?" "Since he was little. He always asked me when he would get to meet Ronald." I nodded, looking out the window and realizing we were driving through downtown. There were only a few sparse houses on either side of the road. A few minutes later, the car was still moving. "Are we almost there?" I asked when I realized we had already passed a residential area. "Almost," she smiled and said. I looked out the window, still not seeing our destination, so I asked again, "Where are we going?" She kept her stiff smile. "To Michael. He's waiting." The car turned into the cemetery gate. The night wind rustled through the dry branches, creating an eerie, chilling sound. I shivered. "Why are we here?" The woman stopped the car next to a small stone pathway, turned off the engine, and then turned to look at me. "Michael is here." I sat still for a moment, trying to comprehend the situation. She had opened her car door and was standing outside waiting for me. I hesitated but still got out of the car. We walked deeper into the cemetery. My shoes crunched on the gravel path, the sound echoing in the quiet night. Large tree shadows loomed on the ground like giant monsters. She walked softly, as if familiar with this path. I followed, my heart pounding. Finally, she stopped in front of a small grave. I looked down and read the deeply carved inscription, "Michael David Thompson, 2015 to 2024, beloved son." My whole body trembled. "He's been waiting for you for a very long time," she said, her voice gentle, as if talking to a living child. "Michael, this is Ronald." I stood there like a stone statue, looking down at the grave, then back at her. "Can you tell Michael a joke?" she asked me, her eyes looking down at the tombstone. I swallowed, my throat dry. I had taken her money. I could do this, just once. I stepped closer to Michael's grave. "Hey, Michael, Ronald has a joke for you. Why did the chicken cross the road?" I paused, waiting. In that silent moment, I heard the giggle of a child. I was a little surprised by the laughter. It was the woman laughing, her eyes fixed on the tombstone. The laughter came from her, but the tone was completely different. It sounded like the joyful giggle of a 9-year-old child. "Why, Ronald?" she said in a childlike voice, her head tilted slightly. I felt frozen, but I still answered, To get to the other side." The childlike laughter rang out again, but this time I clearly saw her eyes. In them, there wasn't just madness, but also the pain of a mother who had lost her child. A few seconds later, she stopped laughing, her eyes returning to their former state. "Michael wants to take a picture with Ronald." She took out a camera. I looked at the grave, then at her. I felt an invisible hand squeezing my throat. I stood up, backed away. I can't." The smile on her face slowly faded. She looked at me with a bewildered expression. "Why not?" I quickly took out the $50 bill and handed it back to her. "I'm sorry, I have to go." I turned and walked quickly towards the exit. Behind me, the woman suddenly burst into loud sobs, tearing through the silence of the night. "Michael, Mom is so sorry." I ran like the wind towards the cemetery gate. Her cries still echoed behind me. I didn't dare look back. I ran until I couldn't hear her cries anymore. I walked all night to get home, still wearing my Ronald McDonald suit. My shirt was soaked with sweat. The next morning, I called my job and quit. I couldn't explain to my boss why, just that I didn't want to dress up as Ronald McDonald anymore. Years have passed, and sometimes I still remember that night. I vividly remember the woman's laughter and her cries. Perhaps I was too cowardly to run away. I could have stayed, taken a picture, and offered some comforting words to that grieving mother. I just wanted a Big Mac after school. But less than 10 minutes later, I was being dragged by my hair, my nose was broken, and I was sprawled on the ground. It all started simply because I dared to tell him to wait his turn in line. I was 16 then, living with my family in San Diego, California. As usual, I walked to the McDonald's on Broadway for lunch. While waiting in line, my eyes were glued to my phone screen when I suddenly felt someone shove hard into my back. A big, beefy man cut directly in front of me. He was wearing a baggy t-shirt with a thick, greasy brown beard, dark sweat stains spreading under his armpits, and a bulging belly that looked like it was about to touch the counter. His tiny, squinted eyes darted at me defiantly when I reacted. A sour, stale odor wafted from him, making me instinctively recoil. I hesitated for a few seconds, then mustered up my courage and spoke. "Excuse me, you need to get in line like everyone else." He turned around, his face flushed. "I'm in a hurry, kid." I tried to stay calm, politely. "But everyone else is in line." "I said I'm in a hurry," he growled, stepping so close his foul breath hit my face directly. "You got a problem?" Before I could answer, he suddenly grabbed my arm. A sharp pain shot through my bicep as his fat fingers squeezed my flesh. He leaned in close, hissing, "I'll rip your little mouth off." My legs felt like jelly. My face burned. Whether from anger or fear, I couldn't tell. I yanked my arm free, stepped back, and gave him space. He ordered and then moved to the waiting area to pick up his food. I continued to wait in line. When it was my turn, I ordered a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke. While waiting for my order and rubbing my still aching arm, I glanced over at him. He was leaning close to the counter, saying something to the young employee handing out food. The young woman looked at the receipt, then at the food bag, and shook her head. He started to raise his voice, demanding a free Big Mac. His voice was full of menace. The girl tried to explain something. He abruptly grabbed her by the collar, pulling her hard towards him. She screamed in panic, struggling to break free. I stood frozen. Other customers turned to look, but no one dared to intervene. Then a man in a white shirt emerged from the back. It was the store manager. He calmly said, "I've called the police. They'll be here in a few minutes." The guy glared at him, then let go of the girl. Before leaving, he turned back. I'll remember your face." The store slowly returned to normal amidst whispers and chatter. I got my order, my hands still shaking. Stepping outside, the delicious smell of the burger made my stomach rumble. I turned into my usual alley to head home. This was a shortcut through an old warehouse district, and then I saw him. He was leaning against the red brick wall, holding a glass beer bottle, his eyes bloodshot. "It's you again?" he said, a twisted smile on his lips. He slammed the beer bottle onto the ground. Glass shattered, the sound echoing in the empty alley. I turned to run, but he was faster. He snatched the bag of food from my hand, taking a long sniff as if savoring his prize. "This is mine." He opened the Big Mac box, took a huge bite, sauce dripping down his chin. I stood frozen. He swallowed, licked his lips, then growled, "This is all your fault. You made me look bad at McDonald's. You're gonna pay." I stammered an apology, but he wasn't listening. The first punch landed hard on my back, sending me sprawling to the ground. My knees and palms scraped raw. He continued to kick my side. The kicks were so brutal I couldn't even scream. He bent down, grabbed my hair, and pulled me up. His face was close, and then the next punch landed squarely on my nose. I clearly heard the bones break. Warm blood poured into my mouth. I begged him to stop, but he just laughed maniacally. Just then, I heard shouts from the end of the alley. A man came running, followed by another, then 2 women. They surrounded him. One person yelled to call the police. He struggled, trying to break free from their grasp. A woman knelt beside me, wiping the blood from my eyes and mouth with tissues, her voice gently comforting. The police arrived shortly after. The big man was handcuffed and led away. I was taken to the hospital. My injuries were examined and bandaged. The big man was charged with assault and battery, and he received a 3-year prison sentence. Even though he was punished, I lived with the trauma for many months afterward. I didn't dare go through that alley. I even avoided the McDonald's on Broadway. I learned a lesson. Sometimes a simple right word can turn you into a target, and if you don't fight back, they won't stop. But I also understood something else equally important. Indifference fuels evil. If those strangers hadn't stepped in that day, I might not be here to tell this story. I'm never working the night shift again. Not because of the low pay or the difficult customers. It's because I can never forget the sight of bright red blood dripping down a clown's painted face. And more importantly, I can't forget the feeling of betrayal when I found out who was behind that makeup. My name is Lucy. I've been working at McDonald's in Riverside, California for 2 years now. The job isn't bad, especially the night shift. There aren't many customers, and my boss is pretty chill with the night crew. Usually I just sit there, do a little cleaning, and wait for the time to pass. The night shift also pays more, so I really didn't have any complaints. That evening started like any other. I was on the night shift at the pickup window. Around 1 a.m., I started getting really sleepy. My head was nodding, eyes closing, when suddenly the customer chime went off. I jolted awake, looked out the window. A figure standing at the menu board made me jump. It was a clown, brightly colored suit, a pale white painted face with a big red smile. "Hello, I'd want a Whopper." The man's voice was hoarse, sounding a little unnatural. "I'm sorry, this is McDonald's, not Burger King, and according to company policy, you have to be in a vehicle to be served," I gently explained. The clown stood still for a moment. "Then I'll have a bacon eider." I frowned. That wasn't on the menu. In fact, I'd never heard of anything by that name. At this point, I figured this was a prankster. "Sir, you need to leave our property immediately." I firmly closed the pickup window. I tried to get back to work. About an hour later, I'd almost forgotten about the whole thing. I was getting ready to shut down the ice cream machine when I heard a noise. Turning around, I saw the clown standing outside the pickup window again. "I'd like a Big Mac and a Coke." His voice was clearer and more serious now. I hesitated, thinking maybe he was just a genuinely costumed customer, and the restaurant could be flexible for certain late-night cases like this. And this time, he'd ordered real items. "That'll be $8.50, I said. The clown handed me the cash. After preparing the order, I opened the pickup window to hand him the bag of food. The clown reached out, but instead of just taking the bag, he deliberately touched my hand and held it there for a very long time. "Excuse me, could I get some extra ketchup?" he said, still not letting go of my hand. I tried to pull my hand back, but he gripped it tighter. "I need ketchup," he repeated, then suddenly yanked my hand hard towards him. Before I could react, he yanked again, pulling my body forward. I screamed in a panic. With my free hand, I grabbed the barcode scanner and slammed it towards him. "Let go!" The scanner hit his forehead, and blood started to trickle down. The clown released my hand, stepped back, his hand touching the wound. Bright red drops of blood dripped onto his pale white face. He calmly offered a very wide smile. I slammed the pickup window shut, my heart pounding like it would burst from my chest. Trembling, I grabbed my phone to call the police, then tried to reach the store manager, but Mike didn't pick up. I called him repeatedly but couldn't get through. The police arrived after about 10 minutes. They checked the surrounding area but couldn't find the clown. They took a report and promised to increase patrols, then drove me home. The next morning, I arrived at the store early to report the incident to Mike. He was sitting in his office, looking tired. Mike listened, occasionally nodding, but I felt he wasn't really paying attention. It was probably just someone trying to mess with you. Kids like to pull stunts like that. You shouldn't worry about it too much. Mike looked up. I noticed a long cut on his forehead. The cut was deep, and there was dried blood around it. My heart started to pound. "How did you get that injury?" Mike raised his hand to his forehead, hesitated, and avoided my gaze as he tried to explain. I clearly remembered the wound on the clown's forehead. Mike's wound was in the exact same spot, the same shape. I looked him in the eyes. "Why did you do it?" Mike stopped smiling. "What are you talking about?" But I already knew the answer. The manager I had always trusted, like an older brother, was the very person who had terrorized me. I quit my job immediately and left. In the weeks that followed, I often woke up in the middle of the night, dreaming of the clown standing by my bedroom window. But the scariest thing wasn't the clown. It was the realization that the people you trust can become your enemy overnight. The real fear doesn't come from strangers, but from those closest to you. I moved to San Diego and started working at a grocery store, and I swore I would never work a night shift again. I'm Bianca, 27, working in an office and making enough to enjoy the things I love. I've been single for years. Past relationships really broke my heart, but I still believe I'll find my other half, and I'm always ready to open my heart to someone new. Last year's Valentine's Day was just like every other year, quiet and nothing special. But that morning, I found a handwritten letter in my desk drawer. It was from Isaac, the new guy at work I had a thing for. He asked me to come over to his place for dinner at 9 that night. I kept reading the letter over and over, my heart racing like crazy. Was that some kind of joke? But his signature at the bottom was legit, and his handwriting was neat and confident, just like him. Isaac was the guy everyone noticed as soon as he started at the company. He was tall, good-looking, and had this confidence like no one else. He always knew how to grab everyone's attention without even trying. Out of all the girls into him, I was the least noticeable, so I didn't have the guts to tell him how I felt. I was feeling both happy and confused, trying to figure out why this was happening to me. I rushed through work, drove home, and spent hours getting ready. All I had with me was a red dress that hugged my body, some fancy heels, and a bottle of good red wine. I stood in front of the mirror, checking out my face, telling myself everything would be fine. I thought that night was going to be a night to remember. The road to Isaac's place was in a quiet neighborhood. The bare trees lined up under the yellow glow of the streetlights. The house was at the end of the road, and the light from the windows looked like an invite. I got out of the car, and the chilly February air made me shiver a little. I felt a rush of excitement as I knocked on the door. The door opened, and there was Isaac with his usual warm smile. He looked perfect as usual, with his shiny black hair and sharp suit that really showed off his confident vibe. "You're here." His eyes practically lit up with satisfaction. I walked in, and the smell of food and lavender from the candles filled the air. The place inside was really neat. The dining table was set up with flickering candles and dishes that smelled amazing. I felt like I was in a dream, but then a sense of unease started creeping in. We clinked glasses, and I tried to chill out a bit more, but my eyes just wandered to the paintings on the wall. At first, I thought they were abstract paintings, but when I took a closer look, they kinda looked like drawings of human anatomy. The details were so vivid, it was creepy. Some of them even had notes scribbled in red ink, like there was some kind of plan coming together. I started feeling confused and uneasy, so I stood up and used the excuse of needing to wash my hands to get away from the table. The bathroom was at the end of the hallway, and the light from the dining table didn't reach that far. I walked in, and my eyes immediately went to the mirror above the sink. There was a red smudge on the mirror, like someone had tried to wipe it off quickly with their hand. I just stood there in front of the mirror, every stroke of the painting stuck in my head, making my mind race with a bunch of unanswered questions. All of a sudden, I saw something flash behind me in the mirror. My heart skipped a beat, but when I turned around, the hallway was empty. A chill ran down my spine, and I couldn't help but think maybe I was walking into a trap that had been set up from the start. Back at the table, the vibe between Isaac and me had totally changed. His smiles weren't warm anymore. They were cold and calculating. The room got suddenly stuffy, and time felt like it was slowing down in a creepy way. My eyes landed on a big painting on the wall. In the painting, there was a girl with blonde hair and big eyes. Sarah, that name just popped into my head, a former coworker who left a few months ago. A wave of horror hit me. I couldn't stay calm anymore. I stood up, quickly said thanks, and asked if I could leave. But Isaac wasn't letting me leave that easily. He stood up, blocking me, and the smile on his face turned into something pretty terrifying. Isaac stepped closer, and I could feel my breath getting faster. I saw a cold, lifeless look in Isaac's eyes, like he'd lost all humanity. I took a step back, but my foot got caught on a chair. He lunged at me, and I barely had time to think before I pulled out the fork I had hidden in my bag. I swung it, and I felt the resistance as it stuck into Isaac's hand. He screamed and stepped back just enough for me to make a run for the door. I rushed to the front door, but it was locked from the inside. I could hear Isaac's footsteps and curses echoing behind me. I turned around and saw him coming at me with bloodshot eyes and a face twisted in pain. His hands were red, but he didn't stop. I ran to the nearest window and used all my strength to smash the glass. As the glass shattered, I climbed through, even though my hands got cut by the sharp pieces. I ran like mad down the dark street, feeling all warm and wet from my palms and knees. But I didn't stop, too scared to look back. When I got to my car, I jumped in, slammed the door shut, and drove off. My heart was pounding, and every breath felt heavy, like I had just escaped from hell. When I got to the police station, I almost collapsed, my whole body shaking. My story made the police head straight to Isaac's place. They found his secret basement, where he kept stuff and pictures of his past victims. Isaac was caught trying to hide not far from the house. His cuffed eyes kept staring me down through the police car window, like he wanted to haunt me forever. The house, the paintings, and Isaac's eyes still popped into my head every night when I closed my eyes. I knew I dodged death, but the darkness Isaac brought would always stick in my head, something I could never shake off.
I'm Michael, 23 years old, and I'm an orphan. 5 years ago, I had a life that many people admired. My dad owned a real estate company, so our family was pretty well off. My mom didn't work a regular job, but she helped my dad a lot with running the company. I was an only child, so I got all their attention. Life was easy from childhood. For 18 years, I never had to worry about a thing. I never really thought about what life would be like without my parents' protection. The year I graduated from high school, I went through the first event that completely changed my life. My dad's company got caught for tax evasion. Not only did he have to pay back the evaded taxes, but my dad also had to cover the interest on that amount. Because of the huge amount of money involved, my dad was prosecuted and ended up getting a 15-year prison sentence. All of our family's assets were frozen. My mom had a serious mental breakdown. On the day of the trial, seeing my dad get sentenced and taken away, my mom cried so much she fainted. 3 months after my dad went to prison, my mom couldn't handle the shock and chose to end her life. I can't even put into words how I felt during that time. At the same time, I lost everything. I blamed my mom for choosing such a negative way out. I wondered why she left me alone when I needed her more than ever. I have to give myself some credit because at that time, I stayed strong, alert, and optimistic. I worked on building a positive mindset, finished high school, and continued with my university program. At first, I still visited my dad regularly, and each visit took me an hour on the bus. But my dad seemed unhappy to see me, and eventually, he stopped wanting to meet. By my second year of college, I stopped visiting my dad. I graduated from college on time and got an office job with an average salary. I met 2 friends, Manny and Oliver, and we became an inseparable trio. One day, my dad's old lawyer got in touch with me and told me about a wooden house in the woods that used to belong to my father. "It will now be yours." I didn't react and didn't have any special feelings about what he said. I thought how great it would be if it were a villa in a nice neighborhood or a luxury apartment. During last year's Christmas holiday, I invited my 2 friends to the wooden house in the woods for a few days of fun. We drove there in 2 cars, bringing food and personal items. Finding the house wasn't difficult. It was quite spacious, and I started to like it more. The inside of the house was modern and very clean, not at all like it had been empty for years. We didn't think much of it. We just unpacked our things and started the party right away. As we drank the wine and beer, we sang and danced, letting the alcohol take over. Suddenly, Manny stood up and shouted, "There's someone! They're standing upstairs, looking down." We looked around but didn't see anything unusual, so we just laughed it off, thinking he was just drunk and dizzy. We sang and drank some more until we passed out. I woke up with a pounding headache and my head spinning, and my throat was really dry. I grabbed a bottle of water from the floor and tilted my head back to drink. Suddenly, I heard a rustling sound coming from the kitchen. When I turned around, I saw that my snack was moving by itself. After I screamed, it fell to the floor and stopped moving. My 2 friends woke up, and Manny quickly found the light switch and turned it on. They asked me what happened. I ran over to pick up the snack, looked at it, and then sighed in relief, saying, I think this house must have a lot of rats. At night, while Oliver went to take a shower, Manny, Oliver, and I stayed behind to clean up a bit. About 20 minutes later, Oliver ran back, looking flustered and a bit angry. He said, "Are you guys playing tricks again? You know I'm really scared of ghosts." We looked at each other in confusion and said we hadn't left the living room since he left. "Who was knocking on the door while I was taking a shower?" Oliver's words made the atmosphere tense. I told him more clearly about what I saw with the snack. Manny and I burst out laughing. "Come on, cowards. Your breath still reeks of alcohol. Do you really think you're sober in this situation?" Manny's words made Oliver and me feel more relieved. We put the food back in the living room, tried turning on the old TV, and surprisingly, it still worked. We drank and slept there until dawn. Just like that, we were drunk for 3 days straight. A few more times I saw a dark shadow. Oliver heard crying, and some furniture and food in the house disappeared for unknown reasons. But we didn't suspect anything because we were always in a half-awake, half-asleep state. By the 4th day, the food was gone, so we decided to walk to the nearby town to buy some more. We left the house at 9 a.m., and when we got back to the forest, we could smell something burning from a distance. Feeling like something was wrong, the three of us rushed toward the house without saying a word to each other. The wooden house slowly came into view, but was 80% burned. Luckily, the fire hadn't spread to the forest or the 2 nearby cars. I was stunned to see the last property my father left burned to ashes. Now it was just a pile of half-burned wood. Suddenly, a woman's scream echoed through the area. She rushed towards me with an angry look, like she wanted to tear me apart. My 2 friends quickly stepped in and stopped her. The woman ran into the fire, which hadn't been fully extinguished, and used her bare hands to flip each piece of wood that was still glowing. It took us a few seconds to react. Oliver quickly called the police, while Manny and I tried to get the woman out of the fire. After a while of searching, the woman stopped when she found something on the ground. She just stood there staring, and then let out a scream of frustration. Underneath the charred wood, a burnt corpse was found. The woman was crying and mumbling, and it seemed like she couldn't speak properly. We couldn't say a word as we watched the woman hold the body in her arms, even though her hands were blistered from severe burns. The police showed up after 20 minutes, bringing along a 6-year-old boy. The boy called the woman Mom, and she was both surprised and overjoyed. She ran over to hug him and cried loudly. This morning, the boy ran into town with us, and the police found him. It was confirmed that the woman was the boy's biological mother, but she couldn't speak. The burned body was identified as a monkey. She used gestures to show the police what had happened. She and her son had lived in the house for 3 years. She was my dad's lover. She also received a large sum of money from my father to raise her child. Another truth came to light, and now I understand why my mother was so miserable. She was the one who always stood by my father and helped him through tough times. But in the end, all she got was betrayal. Everything is over, and I need to focus on the future. I accept that I have a younger brother now, and will make sure to take good care of him.
I am Kate, 25 years old, a female graduate student with a peculiar passion for psychological stories. That passion sometimes feels like a curse, haunting me constantly. The house I rent is in a cold suburban area of Michigan, where the winter winds claw at the windows. It's cheap, old, and has a dark basement I rarely visit. but with its low rent and the quiet surroundings perfect for research, I couldn't ask for more. Lately, strange sounds have been appearing at night. The creaking of floorboards, persistent whispers. I assumed it was just the house being too old. One time, I went down to the basement to find some things. The basement door was slightly ajar, even though I was sure I had closed it. A lingering anxiety followed me like a shadow, but I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Then, one night, the power suddenly went out while I was working on my thesis. The house was swallowed by cold darkness. I moved down to the basement, checked the fuse box, searching for the reason the power was out. The flashlight beam shone through the basement door, and I smelled a musty odor rising up. The basement door was slightly ajar again, but this time I was sure I hadn't forgotten to close it. When I pushed it open, I saw faint shoe prints in the dusty stairs, muddy marks leading downward. The weak flashlight flickered over an old backpack, its contents spilling out chaotically. I picked through the items one by one: a sealed food container, a rusty kitchen knife, a bent lighter, and finally, some old newspapers alongside a photograph. In the picture, a family of 3 beamed with joy. The man kissed a little girl on the cheek, while the woman lovingly embraced them both. The girl's eyes sparkled with innocence and warmth. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut. I jolted, dropping the flashlight. The light flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows on the walls. I rushed to the door, my trembling hands pounding against it. "Is anyone there? Please, open the door!" I screamed, my voice cracking with panic. My heart pounded violently, cold sweat beading on my forehead. I banged on the door, pleading, "Please, I didn't do anything wrong. Let me out." Zero response. Tears welled up as a suffocating helplessness overtook me. Then, a voice from the other side spoke, "Don't be afraid." I froze, my hand slipping from the door. It was a man's voice. "I don't want to hurt you." I stepped back, my entire body rigid with confusion. "I've been here since before you moved in. I'm sorry for watching you. I just needed someone to listen. I'm suffocating. I feel like I'll explode. Please." His hoarse voice trembled, teetering between desperation and something more sinister. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to process this. Then, suddenly, he started singing. A familiar lullaby, slow and eerie. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." His voice cracked on the high notes, making the song sound even more unsettling. I stood frozen, feeling each sorrowful note seep into the cold darkness around me. My body shuddered involuntarily. I used to sing that song to my daughter every night before bed. He trembled, as if struggling to hold himself together. We were a happy family. My wife and daughter were the most precious things in my life, but everything shattered in just one night. They said I killed them. His voice hardened, raw with pain and anger. But I didn't. Why would I destroy my own life? I forced myself to take a deep breath, focusing on his voice, analyzing every nuance in his words. Is he telling the truth, or is this just another story to deceive me? The question echoed in my mind, urging me to face it instead of giving in to fear. I ran away, not because I was guilty, but because no one believed me. I need to find the truth. I need to find the one who tore my family apart. He paused, his voice choking with emotion. I've wandered, hiding from every gaze, drowning in grief and guilt over my wife and daughter. His sorrow reached its peak, and he began to sob. I looked down at the scattered belongings in the backpack, my trembling hands picking up the old newspaper. The headline read, "Massacre, husband named prime suspect." Below, a wanted notice displayed a sketch of the suspect, his face. I glanced at the family photo again. It was him and the happy family mentioned earlier. A whirlwind of emotions crashed over me. I feared, but also felt an inexplicable sense of empathy. If he was telling the truth, then he was not a murderer, but a fugitive running from a crime he didn't commit. A broken man. Thank you for listening. His voice was soft now, as if a weight had been lifted. I heard the basement door unlock. I stared at it, my chest rising and falling rapidly. I sat in the darkness, my heart still pounding, but strangely, the panic had faded. Light from the hallway filtered down like an escape route. I stood up. My eyes glanced at the happy family photo one last time. When stepping out of the basement, the house became strangely quiet, as if the man had never existed. But his words still echoed in my mind. I left everything in the basement except the old newspaper. Finally, I sent it along with an anonymous letter to the police station, hoping that the truth would be revealed. I moved to another budget apartment, where there was no basement or old windows anymore. Every night before sleeping, I still wonder, will he really find justice for his family, or will he continue to live in hiding with that dull pain?
I've got a dream marriage, but a total nightmare for a wife who's supposed to be perfect. Joey, do you think I've put on weight again? Nah, babe, you always look amazing. I usually get asked about my wife's looks at least 10 times. She's super picky about taking care of her body. Back in high school, my wife asked her dad if she could put her graduation pic up in the living room. That pimpled up skin is gonna freak out everyone who comes to our place, honey. I get why she's so hung up on her looks. My wife doesn't work. Her job is picking out a good spa, booking skincare appointments, and figuring out what foods are good for her figure. I'm cool with that. I've got her back, and my money covers everything she needs. But there's one thing that's always bugged me, and I still haven't figured it out. My wife isn't planning on having kids, even though we've been married for almost 6 years. I've tried to convince her a bunch of times, even promised to cover the latest treatments to help her get back in shape. One time I brought her to a company party with me. Hearing my coworkers say I've got a wife who looks like a Disney princess made me feel pretty proud. I could tell how happy and proud my wife was, too. You're so lucky, Joey. I'm seriously jealous. That coworker's joke kind of turned into a death sentence for my marriage. Since then, whether it's a big party or just meeting clients, my wife insisted on tagging along. She bought a ton of dresses and makeup to get ready for those occasions. You should totally feel lucky to be married to me, Joey. My wife was fixing her dress while saying that line I know by heart, like word for word and everything. At another company party, my wife was just laughing away at all the compliments. Joey, what do you think when she said I look like Princess Fiona and you're like Shrek? My wife turned to ask in this kind of condescending tone after chatting with my coworker. We're equals, remember that? I was super annoyed because I always felt put down, so I snapped back. After that party, my wife didn't talk to me for a few days. To chill things out at home, I stepped up to make peace. There's nothing to brag about when you're competing with your own wife. Luxury bags, roses, cakes, and nice bottles of wine. There was a simple spread in quantity, but definitely not in quality. We clinked our glasses, and then I don't remember a thing after that. When I woke up, I found my arms and legs all tied up, and my body stuck to the bed with a ton of tape. Pamela, what does this mean? My wife was lying next to me, whispering in my ear. Babe, I'm sorry for saying those mean things. I'll make it up to you. She held up a glass bottle with clear liquid at my eye level, and the label had a picture of a corroded hand on it. No, Pamela, please, I yelled when I saw my wife slowly tipping the bottle of that crazy liquid. Just a little, don't freak out. Her creepy laugh filled the air as she dumped the liquid right in my face. I screamed, feeling like a million ants were all stinging me at once. I felt my lips bubbling, my eye goo oozing out, and my skin melting like melted cheese. My wife's creepy laugh was still ringing in my ears. Later, I saw the photos she posted on social media, and my friends were all laughing because they thought I was wearing a mask. I have no idea how I got away, or if my wife even untied me. I was feeling around on the floor, with most of my vision gone. I quickly found the bathroom after I figured out the layout of the room. The cold water came pouring in, and it helped ease my pain a bit. But then someone snatched the shower head right out of my hand. That same crazy, twisted laugh and the non-stop clicking of the camera drove me absolutely nuts. I just rushed over, grabbed the phone, and smacked Pamela's chest. I bolted out of the bedroom, trying to dial 911 while my eyes were about to pop out and my lips were still bubbling and sizzling. I got hit in the back by something hard, so I turned around to fight back after I shoved my wife away. A few seconds later, I heard her scream, "My skin! My face! Help!" The police showed up, and I slowly started to fade out. I woke up in the hospital with my face all bandaged up, and it took almost a month before I could see a little light. After a long time of serious treatment, I finally got to see my face again, and one eye was messed up with rough skin. After almost 30 surgeries, I was doing better, accepting that I'd have to live with one good eye and the other one being damaged. I saw a pic of my ex-wife with a long, crooked nose, and I found out her fellow inmates called her the long-nosed witch. I'm Ryan, 17 years old, living with my parents in Arizona. I have a passion for the gym. My father is my inspiration. My dad designed a fairly large room full of exercise equipment at home. Dad has an admirably toned body at the age of 58. My mother is quite young, 13 years younger than my father. Mom doesn't like to exercise but prefers skin-caring and follows a strict diet. I'm very proud to have parents with outstanding and youthful appearances. But I have nothing in common with them, except for my mother's blue eyes. I don't care too much about this. After all, I'm quite handsome according to everyone's compliments. In my father's practice room, there's a wooden shelf containing many medals of large and small awards from gymmers. The top position in the middle of the wooden shelf is a picture of my mother when she was young. But in that photo, my mother has brown eyes. In my mother's room, there's also a very strange picture of a woman. I have never met her before. She's very beautiful, short brown hair and blue eyes like me and my mother. I witnessed several times my mother clutching that photo and crying, looking at her in so much pain and torment. I asked my mother about the photo of that woman. She just smiled at me and did not answer. After many times like that, I didn't ask about that woman anymore. My parents rarely show affection to each other. They respect each other's private space. They have a lot of love for me, but in two completely different ways. Outside of studying, I enjoyed playing music and exercising in the gym. Everything was very normal until the last month. Every time I step into the gym, it feels cold and gloomy, a feeling I've never had before. At first, I didn't pay too much attention to it, nor did I tell my dad about it. Until recently, a series of scary events that happened caused me unable to ignore it anymore. The first time was when I practiced at 9 p.m. I went into the room and turned on the lights and warmed up thoroughly. I started the workout by jogging, but as soon as I stepped on the treadmill, the light in the room suddenly turned off. Power blackouts in the area where I live are quite rare. Looking into the next room, the electricity was still on, I thought the light bulb was broken, but when I got close to the switch, it was in the off state. I turned my hand on the switch and the light came back on. At that time, I did not have any doubts or feelings of fear. I continued the training session and finished at 11 a.m. The second time was also when I was alone in the gym. It was around 10 p.m. I'm doing shoulder raises using resistance bands. Suddenly, the song I was playing turned off, and a few seconds later, a child's giggling voice froze the blood in my veins. The laughter was so loud and haunting, I shivered and got goosebumps. About 5 seconds later, the laughter disappeared. My music continued playing. I stopped the exercise, went to drink water, wiped my sweat to calm down, wondering whatever just happened was real or I was hallucinating. That day I finished my homework early. I didn't tell my parents about those two strange encounters because they would be so unbelievable. The third time it was not at night, but around 4 p.m. It was the weekend, so I spent time practicing earlier than usual. I improved my exercises with barbells. Lying down to lift weights, I feel like it's much heavier, even though my weight remains the same. After lifting it about 4 times, my mind started to feel dizzy and ringing in my ears. I closed my eyes lightly and then opened them to regain consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I brought the weight down at the same time. From the horizontal bar of the dumbbell, a woman hung, her long hair hanging down, her big eyes wide open, her mouth wide open, filled with blood. In her arms, she held a crying newborn baby. The woman pressed her terrifying face close to mine. Her loud scream and the child's cry hurt my ears. I was startled and screamed loudly, unable to control the strength in my arms. The dumbbell pressed hard on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. At that moment, the woman also disappeared. I braced myself, used all my remaining strength to place the dumbbell on the support bar and sat up, clutching my chest and panting. It took a few minutes to calm down. I was about to get up and go to my room. Accidentally, I looked at my mother's photo on the wooden shelf. Mom looked at me, her unfamiliar brown eyes filled with anger and resentment. I was startled to remember the woman's face just now. She looks a lot like my mother, but it's the mother in the picture. I went into the bathroom and poured cold water down really hard to really wake up. Running to my parents' room, I wanted to tell them about the horrors I had experienced. But just as I approached the door, I heard 2 people arguing.
"You are the one who killed my wife and son. You even destroyed your own face just to be here."
I was so shocked. I rooted to the spot, listening to every bitter word my parents said. It turned out that the woman with blue eyes in the picture in my mother's room was my mother's real face. So what about me? What is my true identity?
I'm Trisha, 27 years old. Last winter, when it was extremely cold and crazy snowy, I went through a really scary and haunting experience. I was in Michigan, and my boyfriend Joseph was over in Minnesota. Joseph got hurt during football practice, so we had to cancel our Christmas date. I missed Joseph like crazy and was worried about him, so I decided to drive over and surprise him. I came up with what I thought was the perfect plan: drive overnight, just in case there was heavy snow and traffic the next morning. It started snowing when I left home, and even though I was pretty confident in my driving, I still felt a bit nervous as it got darker and the roads got harder to drive on. The snow was coming down hard and the road was icy, making the car slide around a bit, but I figured I could handle it. About 3 hours into the drive, my stomach started growling and I was feeling tired and sleepy. I decided to pull over at a late-night diner to grab some food and recharge. The place was pretty small, with dim yellow lights on the old tables and chairs, and there were only a few people inside. The waitress was a young girl with her hair tied up and a smile on her face all the time. She looked at me, probably knew I was a stranger, and asked how I was when I sat down by the window watching the snowstorm blow by. When she found out I was visiting my boyfriend, she told me I should find a motel for the night. It was going to snow pretty heavily in a few hours, and the roads were going to be tough to drive on. The girl was friendly and seemed to know the weather pretty well. I didn't plan on staying long, but as I looked out the window, I started to feel how bad the snowstorm was getting. Out of nowhere, a deep voice came from behind me. A tall guy walked over. He introduced himself as Robert and mentioned a few cheap motels he knew about along the way. I thanked him, but felt even more awkward when he overheard my chat with the waitress. But after a second of thinking it over, I decided to take the guy's advice. The motel he showed me seemed fine, at least it was close, and I didn't want to keep driving in this awful weather. The motel was pretty old, with moldy walls and furniture that looked like it hadn't been updated in forever. But for just $50 a night, I couldn't really complain. The snow was coming down heavier and heavier, so I had no choice. I locked the door and lay down on my phone, but then I realized I forgot to ask for the Wi-Fi password, so I threw on my coat and went back out. I kind of glanced at the parking lot and saw a black car struggling before finally parking right behind mine. I didn't think much of it, quickly asked for the Wi-Fi password, and headed back to my room. I locked the door again, took out my phone, and got comfy. That coffee I just had really cleared my head, so I'll probably end up staying up all night. All of a sudden, I heard a light rustling sound in the snow outside the window. It went on for what felt like minutes, step by step. I turned off my phone again, listened, and after a bit, the footsteps stopped. I rushed to the window and pulled back the curtains. Outside, I could clearly see footprints in the fresh snow, stretching from the parking lot all the way to near my window. A chill ran down my spine, and I quickly rushed out of the room and headed to the front desk. My eyes went wide as I looked around, but only saw the motel manager. My heart was pounding, and I could feel fear and tension building up around me little by little. I rushed to the front desk, hoping to find the manager so I could tell him about the footprints in the snow. But when I got there, the sight in front of me made me freeze. Right then, the black car I'd seen earlier started up and drove off. The sleek black car, with its headlights shining right at me, made me blink a few times because the light was so bright. I instantly recognized the guy in the car as Robert, the one I met at the restaurant earlier. The way he looked at me at the restaurant was weird, and now I get why. He knew exactly why I was here, and I had no clue what he was up to. I freaked out and told the motel manager the whole story, and he set me up with a new room. Even though I got moved to a new room, I still couldn't shake the fear. The room felt safer, at least physically, but in my head, everything was a mess. Even though the motel manager tried to calm me down, I couldn't shake the creepy feeling that was just hanging over me. I called Joseph, and as soon as I heard his voice, I just broke down in tears. The next morning, when the traffic looked better, my boyfriend booked a ride to take me to his place, and they said my car would be delivered the next day. I spent Christmas and New Year's with Joseph. Once he recovered from his injuries, we headed back to Michigan together. After that scary experience, I've never driven alone at night, and I stay away from motels.
I'm Dante, 45 years old. I'm the sheriff of the Phoenix Police Department, Arizona. As a sheriff, I have undergone and dealt with every kind of case. Only the case of the abandoned house on the city's outskirts keeps haunting me and my colleagues. That was the winter of 18 years ago, in the evening when I was an investigator officer on the night shift. At midnight, there was a call at the department. I picked up the phone in a rush. That was the dispatcher. With a rather confused and urgent voice, he told me about the phone call he had had. A man with a calm tone called them. I just choked a few people, and now they aren't breathing. Then, suddenly, he laughed as if he were crazy. Number 13, McDowell Street. The man stated the address and then quickly hung up. My two colleagues and I immediately headed over to the address as we knew. When we got there, we saw it was a big house in a rich neighborhood. The house was dark and quiet. We knocked a bunch of times, but nobody answered or opened the door. In the end, we had to break a window so David, our smallest officer, could climb in and unlock the door from the inside. As soon as we got inside, our flashlight stopped working, even though it was fine just a few seconds ago. We felt an intensive smell like fish in the air. On the floor, there was a sticky liquid. After fumbling around for a bit, we finally found the light switch. When the lights came on, we saw a horrifying scene. A layer of dark red blood was on the floor, spreading and soaking into the expensive fur carpet. We searched the whole house but didn't find any unusual signs or the owner. According to the investigation, this house belongs to a wealthy couple named Thomas and Daria. They have 2 kids together. After examination, they concluded that the blood on the floor was enough for 5 or 6 adults. However, Mr. Thomas's family has 4 people and 2 young children. The neighbors around insisted that this fancy house had been empty for about a month. Our team worked for 3 months and still didn't find any clues or bodies. We couldn't track down the location of the person who called the police that evening. The case eventually hit a dead end, but my colleagues and I didn't give up. The Thomas family's house was sealed off for further investigation. A month later, the police got a call saying the door of the house had been opened. We also got a lot of reports from the neighbors saying they heard occasional laughter coming from the house. The investigation team showed up right away. When we walked into the house, we all heard kids laughing. Following the laughter, we went upstairs and found a glowing toy car. One of my colleagues said he must have just seen that car on the first floor. We all just stood there, looking at each other with confused and suspicious expressions. The house still doesn't show any other unusual signs. One evening, the police got a report that some kids coming home from school saw light on the 2nd floor of house number 13. This time, we confirmed that someone was still living in the house. We armed, just in case. When we entered the house, we quickly checked the 1st floor and then headed up to the 2nd floor. Suddenly, all the lights on the 2nd floor turned on, and it startled us. At that moment, David seemed like he was in a trance. He sprinted toward the stairs and jumped down, surprising everyone. As soon as David landed, the gun in his hand went off with a loud bang. My remaining teammates and I looked at each other, totally shocked. When he got to David, he was lying face down in a big pool of blood with a gaping hole in his head. David's sudden and bizarre death left me and the rest of the team in shock. Rumors about house number 13 on McDonald Street started spreading everywhere. The house was even more tightly sealed off. A few months later, when the investigation had stalled, neighbors told us a strange man was living in the abandoned house. When we arrested him, that guy kept insisting he had Mr. Thomas's permission to move in. So Mr. Thomas isn't dead after all. The investigation team has reopened the case about his family. The guy living there was named Leon. He said he was a longtime friend of Thomas. But when we asked him about Mr. Thomas's family, Leon said that Thomas and his wife had divorced a long time ago and that he was now single. We started to have doubts about what this guy was telling us. After carefully searching the whole house again, we found a big wooden box buried deep in the basement. Inside the wooden box were the mostly decomposed bodies of a woman and 2 small children. After examination, it was confirmed that the bodies were Mr. Thomas's wife and 2 kids. We showed Leon the photo to see if he could identify Mr. Thomas, the so-called longtime friend. He said that he had many similar features to his friend, but his features were much more youthful. He pointed out that his friend Thomas had a big mole at the end of his left eyebrow, but this guy didn't have that. I looked up Thomas's family records and found out that his dad and grandpa were also named Thomas. The case of the house at 13 McDowell Street turned into a confusing mess and became a murder that shocked the whole country at the time. That guy named Leon hanged himself in house number 13, just 3 days later. All investigation work on the case has been on hold to this day. The members of our investigation team that year still remember our unlucky teammate David and hope that one day they'll find clues to solve the case.
I'm John, a senior student at the University of Chicago. I'm not the type of person who gets emotional easily. A life with little attention from a young age shaped me into a tough, independent person. But when the unexpected struck, it shattered everything I thought I knew about my own strength. No one could understand my pain when I found out that my grandmother, the only person I had in this world, had been murdered. My world, for more than 20 years, had only been my grandmother, ever since my early childhood. I had no idea who my father was. Many times I asked for information about him, but my grandmother would only look at me and shake her head. My mother, after leaving me with my grandmother, had no further involvement in my life. She was the one who raised me, taught me how to view life, understand love, cultivate patience, and even learn the lessons of forgiveness. Every morning I would sit with her sipping coffee, listening to her stories about the past, the hardships she endured, and the tales of her first love. Especially about my mother. I understood that my grandmother always wanted me to be closer to her. After all, she was the one who gave birth to me. I also tried to create the bond that should have existed between a mother and her son. But the more I tried, the more my mother pushed me away. Anyway, even without my mother, I was doing just fine. Until one day. At that time, I moved into the dormitory due to the heavy class schedule in my senior year of college. Every day I would still call my grandmother, and those conversations became an essential part of my life. Her voice was always warm and full of love, as if the distance between us had never existed. She was the only person I could share everything with, from difficult exams to worries about the future. One evening, before going to bed, as usual, when I called, Grandma proudly mentioned that she would be visiting my mom's house the next day to play with Gypsy, my 15-year-old younger sister. That was also the last time I could call and hear her voice. At first, I thought she was just busy, but then days went by and I couldn't get in touch with her. Her messages became short and cold, unlike usual. She said she was fine, life was good, and she had left my mother's house to go to Aunt Alice's. I asked why she wasn't answering my calls, but she didn't respond. A feeling of unease began to spread, but I tried to convince myself that she was just busy. She often shared posts emphasizing that her current life was going really well. Why was she refusing to talk to me? Why had she become so strange? Wasn't it that every day she always wanted to hear me talk? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from me. I called Aunt Alice and she said that Grandma had never gone there and that she was actually at my mother's house. I decided to call the police. For the first time in my life, I felt weak and helpless. The police went to my mother's house and Aunt Alice's house, but she never showed up. Aunt Alice insisted that she hadn't visited at all. My mother kept saying that she was at Aunt Alice's house, that she had come over last night and left in the afternoon, then went to the hospital for a checkup. But then, everything started to unravel slowly. As I sat in the interrogation room, the police began asking questions I had never even considered. They mentioned that my mother had referred to a debt I owed my grandmother, a debt I had never known about. According to my mother's account, I was a terrible and ungrateful person. While she never once reached out to check on me, she spoke as if she knew everything about my life. The feeling inside me at that moment was a mixture of emptiness and shock, overwhelming my senses. Although I didn't want to, I always had a feeling that my grandmother may have passed away, and my throat tightened, and I was terrified by my own thoughts. Finally, the police obtained permission from my mom's boyfriend and conducted a search of the house. In a plastic container in the storage room, they found the severely decomposed body of my grandmother. The police immediately arrested my mother and her boyfriend. After the interrogation, they quickly ruled out my mother's boyfriend as a suspect, and of course, there was only one person left who could be the perpetrator. In the face of accusations from the police suggesting that my mother did this to profit from insurance or social welfare policies, she adamantly denied everything, but her denials were completely unconvincing. I felt like the entire world around me was collapsing. My mother, the one who brought me into this world, turned out to be the heartless person who hid the body of her own mother just to profit. The story is based on a real case that occurred in Michigan. The story begins when the Michigan Police Department received a call from Carol, the daughter of Patricia Bennett, reporting that she hadn't been able to contact her mother for several days. Carol mentioned that Patricia was living with her sister, but she also brought up a conflict between Patricia and her son, John, regarding a debt. This raised suspicions for the police, as they had not yet asked about John, but Carol brought him up herself. The police continued to question Carol and grew suspicious that she was hiding the truth. They accused her of possibly hiding her mother's body if she had passed away in order to profit from insurance or social security benefits. Carol repeatedly denied the accusations and panicked, which only increased the suspicion surrounding her testimony. The police believe that Carol might be hiding the disappearance or death of her mother.
You open that?
She fit in here?
I mean, she's in there. Oh, she's in there.